is a follow-up to the presentation that Veronica made. I believe that was two weeks ago or so, and soil health. And so, Veronica, why don't you start this out? This is designed to have some discussion and answer some questions. We did not have time to do that before, but and we've also, Veronica and Rajan Ghimire, who from New Mexico State, and I were co-authors on that, but Veronica did the presentation. And we each brought back together a couple of slides each in case you want to refer to those slides. So Veronica, let me turn it over to you.
Mm-hmm. I'm gonna see then how it works to share the screen. I think it's working. Good morning to all, and thank you for being here in this follow-up to the presentation that we sent some weeks ago to this group. Thank you for the organizers for including us and the topic of soil health and the benefits for soil health that cover crops could bring and forage systems. And this presentation, I recorded it, but talking about research and the collaborations that we have with West for so many years and Rajan Ghimire in New Mexico State. Can you see the screen? Can you see this first slide?
Yeah, I can see it just fine.
Of the presentation. And I just wanted to briefly then say that when you want to go back to that presentation, I cover an explanation of the soil health and how we want to know about how we can describe that soil, how that soil is impacted by our management selections, but that we want with this new soil health initiative, with the new challenges that we're facing for climate change and things like that, to listen more to the living component. And that's what I was explaining in the presentation. And I also then cover for the soil health principles, how using cover crops and forages, we could accomplish these 4 soil health principles, and even bringing the grazing in will complete the possibilities that we explore managing our soils more sustainably and returning more the biomass disturbed at the minimum, keeping the living root system and maximizing biodiversity. I also then cover a little bit then how, I don't know if it's better to have it like this, but it will have then the animations. So let me better not do that. But I covered then in this slide how microbes are so essential in our soils to degrade anything that we put back into our soils. If we can use cover crops, that's how we could increase microbes, and anything we do to increase microbes will just keep them in there. We will leave a fingerprint in that soil. It will help us to increase soil organic matter and so many gradual other changes that will occur in our soils that could increase the capacity of that soil to hold more water in the future. Maybe that year you don't see some of the benefits and it could be challenging, but anything you could do, any year you can maybe have cover crops or changes that you can do in your management to bring things back to that soil, organic amendments, anything you can put into that soil when it's possible will give something in the future. We'll keep just bringing a fingerprint in there of microbes helping improving that soil. And I covered some of the research that West and I are doing with others also, collaborators in Littlefield, producers that are transitioning to dryland, that are trying to use the same amount of water in different ways, that are putting some of their land in subsurface drip irrigation with NRCS assistance. And we are just taking samples over time since that first year, and then we will keep going so that we could see that we know that we've seen how microbes are decreasing when they go to dry land, when they have less water available. But if it's possible to do something else, like some of the producers were able to have a rye winter cover crop, it did double the microbes. And that's a good thing. And we can see that now with more samplings, how that can keep helping. Anything you can do that can help them with that transition. and to be prepared for more challenges that we will continue to have with the extreme droughts we're having. So I also even brought from a study that I did when I came here to Lubbock, since from 2003 to 2007, in 5 years in dryland. That's what was available for me to do research at that time, dryland. And it was a good thing because we could see also how challenging and different the biomass that was produced, because it was even already showing some droughts in that 5-year term. But having one of the rotation with a winter cover crop, it helped in 3 years to increase to double the number of microbes. So even if the number of microbes in this region, in these soils, are so low compared to other parts of the country, but still doubling, if you double the microbial component, you could bring back so many benefits, so many functions to that soil. And being a study research plots like that, then it was possible to even do some correlations here and see that 5 years of having more biomass incorporated to that sandy soil for 5 years in dryland, even with challenging years, it helped and it increased. It showed the correlation of these microbes and increases in the microbes with the next year when everything went into cotton, with the cotton yields. So that was shown with that study, and that's why I bring it back always in research presentations I do, because it's challenging to show that. But also in a study that I'm doing with a Lacey Bardeman family in so many acres that they're trying to go into no tillage and to use the winter cover crops as with wheat. I think that the wheat also is showing with the no tillage combination early, 1-2 years, bringing back earthworms. And also then I show it that this could be done maybe later with more questions. Then the positive changes already increasing the microbes in the no-till drip and pivot. And with the other type of measurements, it's even showing already some changes in the no-till dryland. So that was what I did. And then I introduced and researched with Rajan and Chuck West that maybe then we could go to Rajan and expand on other type of cover crops that he is working on in Clovis. So maybe let me, what should I do now? Let's see.
Yeah, you unshare.
Should I then now? Let me see how I go back to, how do I unshare this now? I'm sorry. Oh, okay.
Yeah, at the bottom.
So I do what, Rajan?
Like from where you shared.
Stop share.
Good now. Okay. Yeah. Share. Okay. Thank you, Veronica. Thank you, everyone, for coming. I will go. Let me make that the presentation mode. Yeah, you might have seen Veronica also presented, some of the slides from Clovis. I'm a little bit changing and adding some more slides from that presentation. Specifically here in Clovis, New Mexico, I am working on winter wheat sorghum fallow rotation. And we introduced cover crop, which was planted in February and terminated in May. So it grows about 85 to 90 days, depending on the year. And then this study was done in 2016 to 2020. And we look on different soil health indicators, including some of the work in Veronica's lab, some of work I did here. And then I measured, various soil health parameters. I think some of them Veronica presented last time, but here you can see, fungus, there is a lot of positive response with cover cropping. Bacteria, also positive response. Soil organic matter, there is increase. when you look at the nitrogen component, there is a little bit nitrogen used from cover crops. But you go back to the enzyme activity, you see positive response, weight aggregate stability, that is also positive. And then another is water. That is, we see some negative response. That means they use cover crop use water. And specifically, Chog asked me, why don't we discuss that aspect? So here I am also showing, this was on last presentation also, you could see all cover crops show positive response on fungal component, but there is a difference between species. For example, pea, you can see this much increase in fungal component, oat, more increase, canola, pea plus oat, pea and canola, pea, oat and canola, and 6 species mixture of pea, oat, canola, hairy veg, barley, and forage radish. Now these all different species, and among those, oat and 6 species mix have highest fungal response. That is very interesting. And when we go back to that nitrogen and water question, I added this slide. Last night I looked at 2 years, 2016 and 2017. We monitor seasonal water balance on these systems. This first black bar, this one is fallow, and all these others are different cover crop treatments. In May, when we terminated cover crop, you see there is a big difference. The fallow plot have more water than all the cover crop treatments. But when at wheat planting in October 2016, you see that the difference is on the other side, because cover crops used water, but we get summer rain. During that summer rain event, whatever water was getting in the soil, because of the residue, cover crop residue, and the good ground coverage, that water storage was more in cover crop treatment than fallow treatment. And in February, we pretty much wheat used water, then no difference. And July 2017, when we harvested wheat, again, no difference. That means, when we look at water, timing is very important. Now, if you measure right way after cover crop termination, you see that cover crop used water. But if you wait for a certain time, then the water storage in cover crop is much better than fallow treatments. So it might even out if you give some time to recover that ground. So that is what I wanted to show. And we look at winter wheat and sorghum yield. There was no any negative impact because of water loss, specifically at the time of cover crop termination. So that was a very interesting observation from here. And when we see that, I was more interested into another more detailed study in soil water. And so we look at fallow and cover crop, but different cover crop systems like bursting clover, Austrian winter pea, annual ryegrass, winter triticale, turnip, and daikon radish in a forage corn sorghum rotation. And we monitor water up to 1 meter depth. And here I would show you some results. This is 2018-2020 study, but I have not able to analyze the recent data. But I would show you, this might be interesting for you. So I put together this last night. This is a cover crop phase. We planted in September 2018, and then keep cover crop until April first week and terminated. Here you can see cover crop use moisture in all systems, in all depths, 0 to 10, that is top 4 inch, 8 inch, 12 inch, and then about 4 feet depth. Now there you can see all throughout the profile there is a little bit moist water use. Then early growth of forage sorghum, we could see the same difference. There is a big gap, but about mid-season, this study is irrigated. So when plant needed more water, we started giving irrigation, and then it actually catch up at some point, like mid-May. There was no difference. And then afterward, when the plant really needs more water, because of more residue, cover crop residue, again, there is more water in cover crop system as compared to fallow. Then again, second year, similar trend, but the second year we see big difference. Last fall, it was relatively dry. Their cover crop draw more moisture, and then we need to look at how this year's moisture response in main crop, sorghum or corn, how that goes. We are still looking into the data. But if we look at last year's yield, being this an irrigated, first study, we did not see that difference. But here, this is, I don't know if you can see it, looks like this A is cover crop system, and then this B is fallow. So with irrigation, if you have irrigation, that is a big benefit from cover crop. And then this was very easy to convince people, because even in the plant height, we could see clear difference on this study. So that was very interesting. And I'm also participating in another, global meta-analysis, which involve more than 90 papers. But I don't want to go much detail. I want to point out to the arid and semi-arid region. You can see, succeeding crop yield. Here either, in some cases, there is a high variability, again, depending on location, depending on soil. But overall, there is not much difference between, having cover crop versus no cover crop. And in a certain area, you see benefit. And here, overall, is a little bit less yield, maybe because of the water use. Because you can, we could see on this study, the water use is different between cover crop system and no cover crop system. But yield difference was not that clear. But when we look at evapotranspiration, the cover cropping significantly decreased water loss through evapotranspiration. And water use efficiency was pretty much similar. Here you can see a little bit improvement with cover cropping. Again, there is a high variability among different treatments. So these were the two slides I really wanted to share in terms of water dynamics. We see clear benefit in terms of soil health and water management. We need to be careful, and then maybe species selection, maybe timing of cover cropping, how long we cover crop. Those factors this determines whether you get net benefit or a little bit loss in terms of yield. And another study we wanted to share, I don't want to go much into this slide, but we look at how livestock plays a role in cover crop or crop rotation system. And again, we look at nutrient cycling through enzyme activities. And again, this was done in Veronica's lab, same enzyme assays she used on her other studies. And when we look at this, two grassland, this GGL indicate grazed grassland, and this one is ungrazed grassland. Here, ungrazed grassland have more enzyme activity than grazed grassland. But in case of cropland, this is CTGC, this first blue, this is a grazed system. Other two red columns are ungrazed systems. And you can see grazing increased enzyme activity on cropland. And in my lab, I look at mineralizable carbon. That is another indicator of microbial activity, specifically related to soil organic matter. And on that one, we could see grazed grassland have much higher mineralizable carbon than ungrazed grassland. In cropland, if there is no livestock, typical situation is this bar would be much lower. On other studies I see with the tillage, mineralizable carbon is lost and then you measure lower. But here it is almost like comparable to no-till system. So that means livestock is beneficial on this study as well. So that way, I just go brief, and then maybe in the discussion we can discuss more other aspects. So I would just reiterate cover crop, specifically oat and their mixture with other cover crops were effective. Soil water dynamics varies between cover crops and fallow system, and livestock integration was helpful. So with that brief, I will let me unshare my slide and then give it back to Chuck.
Okay, well, I am not going to use Veronica's beautiful slides, but I made a few slides that they just have some text because I want to go over some ideas. But before we do that, is there anything specific that any of you want to ask Veronica or Rajan that you want to catch it now, some particular specific detail before you forget, and then we can come back? You may want to.
I would like to ask a question.
Yeah, go ahead.
First, thanks to Veronica and Rajan. This information is pretty awesome. So my question is actually for Rajan regarding this cropping system. Have you also done economics on these plots? Because I mean, just from a soil health perspective, this approach is really amazing. But how feasible would it be for a producer to adopt these type of practices?
Yeah, we did economic analysis. I work with economists at NMSU and did a study, analysis and first experiment where we compared those 8 different cover crop like pea, oat, canola, those mixers. But it was not complete. What we learned, if we do just simple cost benefit analysis, you lose about 30 to, the seed cost, pretty much you need to spend extra for seed. Now, otherwise planting cost is covered by pesticide applications. Fallow plot you need to spray, and the cover crop plots you can avoid 1 or 2 spray. So that is kind of operation cost is same, but the net difference is seed cost. And some states provide incentive more than other. Maybe Chuck will bring on his discussion as well. In New Mexico, our incentive is about $50 per putting cover crop like no-tillage and other conservation practices. But I look at that data, I think Texas is a little less as compared to New Mexico. There may be a $30 you can just cover under that EQIP program. That will cover, I think, the minimum cover crop cost needed. But in New Mexico, the incentive is a little better. I think $50. It starts, I think, 42 to 57, depending on your practice. So that way it covers cost. And then we also look at alternative scenario. What if we graze that cover crop? Of course, we could not graze on our system, but we look at that scenario, and then there you can get benefit from cover crop. And if you, these environmental services, soil health services, it is tough. Let's say fungal community increased, almost like more than 20%. But how do we give economic incentive for that? That is tough. Organic matter, same thing. But we look at a different scenario, and organic matter is a little more established. You know, if you have this much carbon stock, if we measure, and then there is a different carbon accounting system, like California gives some incentive for adding carbon to your ground. If we follow those criteria and then look at those scenario, then cover cropping is net benefit. We look those three different scenario: forage grazing, nitrogen fixation, organic matter addition, and then presented some of that data in our economic analysis.
Okay, well thanks. So what Rajan and Veronica have pointed out is that when we do research, we have fairly restricted situation there. We have some small plots, or we just have a few treatments. We're just testing a few years. But as you know, the years vary tremendously in terms of weather from year to year. And so Rajan pointed out that what may not be profitable one year becomes profitable a different year, or in terms of the water balance shifts tremendously. And also the whole idea, I mean, this whole area of the cover crops and soil health, we're really working with nature, aren't we? We're trying to work with nature, and nature doesn't always cooperate. And plus, our typical economic system is set up on an annual basis. I mean, we spend money or we borrow money, we sell our products on an annual basis. And in fact, the benefits that we're trying to get in the soil health improvements with cover crops or residue management or grazing, some of those don't take, they don't show up for about 10 or 15 years. And so we are, drawing on your level of enthusiasm and your dedication to the idea that we're trying to work with a biological system here that is within the context of a highly variable weather from year to year. And so we just want to say, stick with it, because we think that these benefits will accrue over time. It just may take 10, 15, 20 years for some of those improvements to be shown. Okay, so what I'm going to do is just say a few words on some other work, and that relates to water and grazing using livestock, and a little bit of economics stuff in there too. Okay, let's see if I can get this out of the way. Okay, so yeah.
Sorry, can I interject something real quick?
Sure.
We started adding grazing into our cover crop mix here on our cotton farms in Lubbock. We started on pivots because we knew we could water things up, and we've done it 1 year, and it's been amazing, the difference that we've seen just in the few rains that we've gotten, the amount of water retention and how quick it soaks in. But just the difference in the soil, Phil, I brought more like 178 cows down, and we're grazing them on 5-acre paddocks and moving them every day. And it has been truly astounding, the differences that we've seen this year. We've had very little rain to offset, and we've watered it minimally. And we just keep rotating these cows through 3 different pivots until I took them back to the ranch to calve. But I love it. My neighbors have been shocked. Everybody thought that the soil would be hard, but the soil underneath where I was running those cows in an intensive grazing system versus the other side where there's a cover crop and then cotton planted, it's different. It's just amazingly different.
Yeah.
I love it, and we've decided it's worth. We think the long-term assets that we build in the ground will far beat whatever we lose in the short term. Okay. Especially with cotton being so cheap right now. So great. I just wanted you to know that we love it, and it's worth it.
So that was Lacey who just spoke, right? Lacey Vardaman.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, sorry.
It helps to identify your name when you speak up. So this is very good, yes. And we've had some conversations like, so one of the things, and in fact, the thing that Lacey was referring to, one of the things is infiltration. Because when you have better vegetative matter like crop residue or with the cover crop material, even after it's been terminated, you still have the crowns, the stems and leaves and roots there. And that goes a long way toward helping rains get infiltrated into the soil. And this is what we really want. As we irrigate less, or with that we are transferring into dryland management, we must improve the rainfall efficiency. And I've seen numbers coming from Kansas and Colorado that can mean a couple of inches more of water. And a couple of inches over 12 inches during a cotton growing season, that is significant if that comes at the right time. It's very good. So thank you very much, Lacey. Say something else about the grazing is that, so when you have cattle out there grazing, I mean, they are excreting nutrients, of course. And so, with the manure and the urine, that you get this more nitrogen available, which may explain, Rajan, why you saw that greater microbial activity, more respiration rates, because you have more nitrogen available. And so that's very good. So on the first slide here, in my first line, I'm just mentioning that we have, cover crops produce benefits, but there are costs involved, just like, Rajan mentioned about the seed costs, establishment costs, termination costs. And grazing cattle is one way to recover some of those costs, and or even making hay off of it, or maybe even chopping it for silage. But to recover that as forage is a way to recover some or all, or even exceeding the cost, so you're actually making a profit. So think about winter wheat. Winter wheat is where we grow it around here. It is pretty commonly grazed part of the winter. And there are two options that people follow on winter wheat. One is as a dual use crop. That is, they graze it toward the end of February, take the cattle off, fertilize it again, allow that wheat to grow up and to produce a grain crop. Okay, that's the dual use, grazing and then a grain crop. But many other people are producing wheat just for grazing, okay? And this is common for the dairy heifers, for example. And for stocker cattle that will be going into feed yards. So the graze out, though, is when you graze beyond February. You're grazing into March and into April. You may graze it as long as there's growth out there. And then that particular wheat field may sit fallow for the summer, or you may go into a summer annual crop. Okay, so so think about that graze out as a type of a covered crop that is used for grazing. So here I mentioned stocker beef or dairy heifers. I'm just suggesting here to do this graze out or this grazing in from late February through early April. Now you can go later, of course. However, we are very concerned about the water content of the soil. And that late February to early April is a period in which the cool season species are going into a rapid growth. And it's getting warmer. We don't have much rain during the wintertime, but you get into March, on the average rain starts picking up, and into April, it picks up some more. And so we wanted to get, take advantage of that. So, so here I'm just looking at around 6 to 8 weeks of grazing. And during that time, these animals, the stocker, they may be steers or heifers, they may be gaining weight at 2.5 to 3 pounds per day. Now, of course, the steers will graze, will actually gain faster, but we have seen 2 to 2.5 pound per day gains during the summertime on our overall blue stem. And but during this cool season period where the forage, this cover crop, is extremely high quality, I mean, high protein, very digestible, you can get some very good weight gains there during this period. So the aim there is to capture high nutritional quality during the most rapid growth phase. Okay, and if you terminate the crop in early April, so that you can take advantage of those April and May rains to replenish the soil profile. But you've got all this nice residue, the crowns, the stems, and that water is going to come in there faster than if it just been laid fallow during the wintertime. And now, I'm saying early April, even though I know that we still get more forage growth all during April and into May. Okay. However, some of the research that's been done here at Texas Tech has shown that if we have a cover crop like wheat, and we are grazing it, keep grazing it into May or that, and then terminate it, and then plant cotton within a couple weeks, we get a reduction in our cotton growth, and it's due to this fancy word, allelopathy. That is that there are some compounds in that decomposing wheat which can inhibit the growth of a subsequent cotton crop. Now, so if you terminate that earlier, and if you got wheat, and also rye is another one that does this, that gives time for that residue to decompose partially enough so that the allelopathic chemicals can degrade. So they go down to a lower concentration in the soil, and you reduce that problem. Some of you may have some reactions to that. Does anybody want to speak up about that? Have you had experience with that, or do you have some some feelings about letting that get too far? Is there? Okay.
Chuck, it's Lacey again. On our cotton, the side that we plant multi-species cover crop, and then we plant cotton we terminate it and put cotton into it, we haven't seen any issues. Of course, we're terminating, I'd have to look at the calendar and see exactly when in April, but we're not grazing that side. We're just rotating from grazing one side and we're grazing it a full year, and then planting cotton into cover crop, and then just alternating back and forth and doing the same on dry land, just in a little slower manner. But everything we've seen, it's just been positive.
Okay, and that multi-species cover crops contain what? What were the species in there?
What we started off with this year, we had trouble getting everything in when we needed it. So we started on rye, wheat, Sudan grass. We're keeping daikon radishes out at all times. Our clovers by the time that came in, we got a cold snap and they didn't do very well. But mainly just a couple of different types of Sudan grass, some proso millet, and the rye and wheat. And we're just adding more and more radishes and turnips in this year as we're going forward, because the cows do great on it, and it just keeps that tuber growing underground, and it just puts out at the top. And we've just been super impressed. I've taken tons of photos because we've just been so impressed at how that's turned out.
Okay, so if you had Sudan grass and proso millet, those are summer crops. Those were planted in the previous spring, and then you graze them during the summer.
Yes, we're kind of just throwing. I had a bunch of cows I needed to move because Bailey County did not get any rain at all. And so we were just throwing things out and planting it and seeing what did underneath different pivots. We'd water it enough to get it established and get it up to about 10 inches, and then just start grazing cattle across it in 5-acre lines. And it did amazing. Yeah,
well, in fact, I think that it's ideal to have that more complicated type of rotation, in that you're also using a summer cover crops, and which then gets rotated to cotton the next summer. And so that this is not just a simplistic, what you're doing is not just a simple, late fall planting, and then you get some winter and spring, and then the short-term grazing I'm talking about. You're doing more of a year-round integrated thing with crop rotation. And I see that as really better. It's really much better.
That's our goal. And our goal is to continually keep something growing on half of that pivot for sure in the cover crop situation, be it summer, winter, and then we're just rotating them back and forth. And this is our first year to do it this way, but we've already been amazed at the changes that we've seen in the soil composition. Granted, we haven't had it tested yet, but just going out there and feeling it, and when we do run a pivot across, how much quicker it goes in, and just the number of worms that we're seeing.
Well,
I didn't think that we would get worms back that quick. So
those are
very pleased.
those are two great indicators. That is the infiltration rate of the water and the earthworms. I mean, I think I've been living out here for 8 years. I think I've seen 2 earthworms the whole time I've been out here, and so this is fantastic.
Yeah, that one I also can add, you know, in this 2016, 2020, this experiment, first 2 years we did not see any earthworm. But now we are seeing a lot more earthworm on those cover crop plots. So I have not counted them, but we could see visually different on earthworm population on those cover crop plots.
Okay, thank you. Okay, let me move on. I just got a couple of points here, and in terms of grazing, because there are a lot of crop producers who are not livestock people. They don't have their own livestock, and so some do. Like Lacey, have your own livestock, produce your own livestock, or contract grazing. That is, you know, someone who has a feed yard or a dairy owns the cattle. They truck them over, and they pay you so much per pound of gain. Okay, so that's one way to do it. So you don't have to be, you know, the cowboy that has them. But of course, if you're doing contract grazing, you've got to have the right fencing material, the right fencing, set up the watering material, the corrals, and to handle the animals and all that stuff. You got to have the right equipment to do it. Supplementation. Now, this is another one that comes up. This question here, because many people during the winter time, and maybe Lacey, you can weigh in on this too, supplement the cattle diet. If they're grazing low quality material from the previous summer or early fall, like stockpiled over blue stem, then you need to supplement with some protein and some energy. But in the spring, the protein content of that forage is actually quite high, you know, during March and April. And if you got, you know, 15, 18, 20% crude protein, you don't need to be putting money into a protein supplement. You need to be giving them an energy supplement, which is what corn is. Just, you know, corn grain, steam flaked or flake corn. Cottonseed is actually pretty high in protein, cottonseed meal, but some other ones are distillers grains, which is actually kind of high in protein, but this is can be a very inexpensive, especially if you can get a local supply, which is wet. And but somehow, you know, using supplementation for balancing protein and energy. Types of cover crops, 3 categories of cereal grasses: wheat, rye, triticale, and oats. Those are all cool seasons. The brassicas. Lacey mentioned the radish. There's kale, rape. Those are all brassica types, and which are very high protein in those leaves, very, very low fiber content as well. This is where I like to have not just these, but have a fibrous type like a cereal growing with it. And then there are legumes, peas, crimson clover. I saw crimson. Bill, we're out at Bill's place, I think that was a couple years ago now, that he had triticale and crimson clover as a mixture out there. There's also lentils and sweet clover. What about economics? Well, there's some work at Kansas State, cost-benefit analysis of multi-species cover crops. And they had mixtures of, each mixture had grass, legume, and a brassica mix. So these are 3-way mixtures. And the most expensive seed mixture was rye, radish, and pea. And that cost $30 an acre. And they harvested forage off of it. They didn't have cattle. They just harvested and so $1 worth of seed was associated with 100 pounds of forage per acre. So $1 per acre of seed was 100 pounds of forage per acre. The least expensive was oats, turnip, and pea. Now, pea shows up in both of these. So it must have been the oats and turnip versus the rye and the radish. This is the least expensive, only cost $21 an acre. And so for each dollar spent on seed, they got 170 pounds per acre of forage. Some of the other forages, other species were barley, wheat, berseem, clover in there. And something else, another interesting piece of work from this is, at Western Kansas in the Tribune, so it's very, very dry out there. They're looking at to replace, and they're looking at wheat alternate years with fallow, and wondering if they should replace the fallow with cover crop. And just growing a cover crop instead of fallow without harvesting the forage, they lost money on the wheat. But when they had forage harvest and assigned a value as a hay, they increased the whole system net returns between 26% increase, even as much as about 3-fold increase. So it's a huge increase by harvesting the forage. This points out the value of using cover crop as forage as a way to not only capture the cost of the seed, but so that you can feel good about all the other benefits to the soil health, but actually make more money on it. And then there's a question about water. The more biomass that is produced during the winter and spring, especially spring, and the longer that spring growing period, the more you reduce the soil water content. And this is what Rajan showed. You start getting into March, you see this drop. It's going into a rapid growth phase. And in that research from Kansas State, lentil reduced soil water the least because it had the lowest yield and the shortest season. But all in all, for every 2,800 pounds per acre of forage of the cover crop biomass yield, they reduced the soil water content only by 1 inch. Okay, so this is actually, this is over a ton per acre, close to 1.5 tons per acre of forage. And this 1 inch decline in the soil water content is not that great. That should be able to be recharged during May and June. And then lastly, on some other work at KSU, triticale in lentil increased the soil organic carbon, so the organic matter went up, and the aggregation. So you have these nice clusters of good structure, reduced erosion, reduced loss of nitrogen and phosphorus. Anyway, that's really all I have. Just showing that there are some ways to minimize the loss of water. And going back to this spring growth, having cattle out there grazing actually reduces the leaf area. You don't have this tall, foot growth. If they're grazing it down to like 4 to 6 inches, having less leaf area means less transpiration losses from that pasture, and that way you can save water, which I think explains a lot, Lacey, why you are still getting some good response there with your grazing. Okay, I'll turn it, let's have some more questions and discussion. There is a comment in the chat box from Roy Dixon. I'd also like information on this: lettuce, spinach, and broccoli cover crops and animal ration usage. Well, the people who do the cover crop work have not been choosing lettuce and spinach and broccoli, probably because there's already been quite a bit of work done on the other brassicas. Now, of course, spinach is not a brassica, but for the broccoli and lettuce are. That that they've hit on, ones that are, that do have higher yields, maybe longer growing season, and also the root structure. Maybe the lettuce and the spinach have really shallow roots, but those are, I mean, if you look at spinach and lettuce leaves, the leaves are extremely thin and weak, and they may not stand up to grazing very well. Whereas the radishes are very tough, and also the turnips. I mean, turnips have been used a lot, and there are forage turnips that have been bred for very large growth and large tubers. So I think that the lettuce, spinach, and broccoli just have not been shown to have much promise in terms of being really resilient and tolerate that.
Chuck, I wanted
Yes.
just to say, in case this something interesting for another meeting that we have to explore other systems and other things that are done. I have an ARS colleague in Salinas, California, and it's a similar climate, although it is a different market and options, but he's very energetic when he talks, and he has many YouTube videos, and there they're producing the lettuce, spinach, or broccoli. And I mentioned that because someone had a question about spinach in the group, in the chat.
Yes,
So he could
Jean,
maybe be
yeah.
yes, Jean Ann did.
and maybe just in case to listen to how they do things. And then they are using for cover crops legume rye, mustard, or rye. But then the main crops are then spinach and lettuce or broccoli. But just to have another perspective in another meeting, maybe we could listen to him.
Yes, I see that you wrote that in the chat box, which is very good. And of course, you know, the Salinas Valley is the lettuce garden, you know, for the U.S. And it's extremely high quality forage. There's no question about that. But it just should do very well. But I think that it probably you know, is not as productive as those like the forage turnips and so on. Anybody else have any questions or comments?
Yeah, Chuck, I have a couple of comments to make.
Good.
One, I want to underline the benefits of the infiltration, and I certainly agree with your findings on that. And the idea is to somehow save moisture, because we don't get all the same amount of moisture every year. So again, your long-term approach recommended on that, I'd underline that also. So if we can save from moist years to dry years, like this one, for us at least, then that'll help a lot. I try to talk to people in terms of physical images about what's going on in the infiltration and the role that the microbes play, because the plants themselves dig the mining. They do the mining, but the plant tissue stays resident until the microbes break it down. And when they break it down, then they deposit a fluid that holds the sand particles together so it maintains the structure. And that structure is fragile. Any passage with a pickup or cows, or, perish the thought, a breaking plow is going to change that physical structure. The other thing is, going into the CRP, there is going to be some CRP plowed out for next year.
Yeah, that's
and,
right.
There needs to be kind of something that we can encourage farmers to adopt, and we have to show benefits of some sort. Now, I spoke with one person, and he's going to so-called strip till when he breaks his CRP out, but he's still going to be running a shank and a plow every 40 inches. And I think there's a lot of mining work that has been residue from the last 10 or 15 or 20 years, however long the land was in CRP, that'll be destroyed, even though on the surface they view it as being strip tilled. The last thing I wanted to comment was that, and I don't have evidence, but from experience, it seems to me like the wheat is the least allelopathic, and the rye is the most, and then the triticale is somewhat in the middle, and that's what I've chosen again this year. I've seeded some, but I dry seeded it and I scattered it with a manure spreader. And it's simply a mixture of turnips and triticale.
Okay, great. Well, those are very good comments.
Okay. And one last footnote. Unfortunately, I leased some CRP, and I don't get cash benefit because that's an arrangement that the person that's going to graze it with the government CRP program. But they tend to leave the cattle until the grass is about a ½ inch tall. So I think that's a little bit heavy. And
Yeah.
because of this particular year, then it's permissible to carry them till the end of September.
Yeah. We have to be really careful about the overgrazing. So Veronica or Rajan,
Chuck?
do you have any things? Oh, yeah, Jean Ann?
This is Jean Ann. The reason I was asking about spinach is I have been reading about the new red spinach that has been developed in California by the USDA. And last year was the first year that I had heard about it. And I was curious about growing that spinach on my cotton farm that has underground drip irrigation as another crop that would bolt, and the seeds are what I'm going for the red spinach. And I would leave all the spinach in the field and just plant the cotton after we've harvested the seed from the spinach.
Well, this is the first time I've heard about, using spinach as a forage, even though obviously it's extremely high quality, very high protein. I want to turn this back over to Veronica because she's the one who has this contact with USDA people in Salinas about that. So Veronica, are they doing any work where they actually plant cotton into the spinach residue after seeds have been harvested?
No. But I think that we could benefit from having maybe another opportunity than Eric Brennan talking about like the economic aspects and everything, because this is research plots, but really commercially also at the same time managed, and he knows a lot of the details on the economics.
Yeah.
And this is in an area that they have similar climate as we do. It's a semi-arid region, sandy soils. I mean, that's why I work with him. I did some of the microbial component there, and they also tried comparing the use of compost, yard waste compost, and none, and we could determine by how much anyway. Then the microbes could be increased by the compost, but the most benefits were on having those cover crops that are rye, also as we do, but the most are some other things there, but still he could bring us a good perspective anyway of that climate and how they do manage spinach, lettuce, broccoli there. So. Okay,
that's really quite intriguing. I don't see anything physically wrong with no-till planting cotton into spinach residue. Just to make sure that you have a decent emergence that's not too thick that you'll actually have too much mulch on there. And that might make the emergence of the cotton hard, but also that would slow down the rise of the soil temperature, because cotton seeds need pretty warm temperatures in the soil in order to germinate and to emerge. And having that spinach foliage cover will keep that soil cool longer. But I would love to see spinach mulch out there. Those leaves are very
here in Clovis. So on that soil temperature, I also notice our cover crops, no matter what cover crop, I see like 2 to 3 days delay on like a heading
of the
for sorghum.
I see.
But that really did not affect yield. we did not get any reduction in yield. Sometimes it is 5% higher, sometimes 5% lower, but it's within a range. Just a couple days, it might affect. Instead of today, it might germinate couple days later, and then some of the physiological, how significant that is, I don't know. We also debate, that one day, yes, if you could not harvest it today, and then tomorrow there is a frost or some other things, in that year it might affect. Other than that, having cooler temperature have more benefit on our system than negative. But of course, germination and some other things, it will delay a little bit. That is my experience also.
It just might be a little bit less even, and sometimes with the cotton seedlings, there are disease problems to be concerned about. And anyway, but that certainly opens up a very interesting topic. I think we've come to the end of our hour, haven't we?
Oh, okay.
Already. Does anybody else have any parting shots, any parting comments, or things you want to add to this discussion? Well, I think we've had a pretty good turnout. I mean, we had some good back and forth, and some of you producers have great experiences. And we in the academic world really benefit a lot from hearing that and want to hear back more, like what Lacey and Roy and Jean Ann, what you folks are doing. Helps us a lot. Okay, I think I'll turn it back over to the host. Samantha Borgstad is the TAWC Communications Director and the host of this thing. And thank you, Samantha, for putting this on. And I thank all of you for tuning in. Okay.
Yes, thanks everybody. Have a great weekend.
All right. Yep, y'all too. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Hey, thank you. Thank you, everyone.